Hi, and welcome to Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast. I'm your host, Holly Petre. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking about Starbucks closing stores for health and safety concerns, McDonald's buying out one of its franchisees, and Dave & Buster's all-new executive team. Later on, you'll hear from Bret, CEO of Cava. Elsewhere on NRN, Takeaway with Sam Okus, Sam's Pod. He spoke with Lauren Bailey of Upward Projects about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. They get into the nitty-gritty of what it's like to really start a business. Hint, it involves ramen and Red Bull. And NRN is launching a brand new podcast. This Monday, get your first dose of First Bite, the new daily morning podcast from NRN. Every day, we'll be coming at you with a brand new podcast covering the day's top headlines, as well as a deeper dive into one of the stories with an NRN editor. That's launching on July 18th, wherever you get your podcasts and on nrn.com. Now, it's time to introduce my lovely co-hosts.
I'm Leigh Anne Zinsmeister, Managing Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
I'm Senior Food and Beverage Editor Bret Thorn.
Hi, I'm Joanna Fantozzi. I'm Senior Editor with Nation's Restaurant News.
The long intro today. I'm like a little out of breath.
Did it to yourself, kid.
Oh, I like it. You created like a deck and a lead into the podcast.
Such writerly terms for our audio format. You could tell we're a bunch of writers. All right, so let's get into the news, guys. Let's just jump in right away. Sam's not here to distract me, so we're jumping right into the news. No need for Leigh Anne to crack the whip. We are doing it today.
Amazing. I love to see it.
So Starbucks closed some stores for health and safety concerns, which had to do with drug use, 16 stores to be exact. So Joanna, you wrote the story. Why don't you kick it off and tell us a little bit about this, what was going on?
So this is not surprising that this happened because the interim CEO Howard Schultz had been hinting at it with an interview with the New York Times at a special forum. He talked about how the open bathroom policy at Starbucks might not last forever. And while that policy is still in place, they are making sure that health and safety is a priority at certain stores. So these 16 stores that are closing had issues with customers and even just members of the public doing drugs in the bathroom, which is an issue that had come up previously a couple of years ago when some employees at a Starbucks in Seattle rallied to get needle disposal boxes installed in their bathrooms because this had been an issue. What I find really interesting, I'm curious what you guys have any thoughts on this, is that they decided to just completely shut down these stores as opposed to taking other solutions into account.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll never know, but it makes me wonder what other solutions were talked about behind the scenes and how they came to draw this as their best solution. I will say I was glad to see that they're transferring the workers to other stores in the areas, because my first thought was, yikes, that's a lot of people to lay off because of this, and could make workers less inclined to complain in the future. But the workers are all being transferred to other stores.
I mean, yeah, there's still a labor shortage everywhere, so you don't want to let go of good workers, or even, slightly below average workers if they're getting the job done. It's sad that Starbucks can't, and it's not Starbucks' fault, but that things have become so difficult apparently in these particular locations that a coffee house can't operate safely. Or it's possible there's something else afoot that Howard Schultz has in mind that we don't know about. But because, everywhere in the United States, crime is getting worse, but it's still not remotely what it was when I was a teenager in the 1980s when, cities were really quite dangerous. I mean, so it's an interesting reaction. And, in a lot of large cities with robust dynamic populations, Starbucks has had coded bathrooms for a long time. You needed to get a code from a worker there after you bought your coffee, and then you could use the restroom. So I guess that wasn't enough.
I wonder if that's actually going against their policy, because their policy is supposed to be open bathrooms in all of their locations. I wonder if maybe it's an exception to the rule, those couple of locations in New York, but yeah, they are supposed to be open bathrooms to the public. And I think it's interesting because it seems like Schultz is kind of struggling to balance the health and safety of his employees that are concerned about this, that are complaining about this, and might be going to unions for this, with that thing, with that thing that he created, that culture that he created of the third place. He's the one that put it in place, like whatever it was, 5-6 years ago. So
It's hard to believe 2018 was 5 or 6 years ago. Or 4 years ago.
Right, 4 years ago.
But still, it feels like it was yesterday.
I can count.
But Starbucks has always, their whole model has been, this is a place where you can hang out and work and do your thing, and also buy 650 calorie, 32 ounce Frappuccinos. I don't think they're 32 ounces, but they were, as I remember, sort of founded as community places where people could hang out, and the whole free bathrooms for all thing was great, super handy, especially in walking cities like here in New York, where often you need a bathroom.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the policy changes and evolves company-wide going forward from this.
Right, and this is definitely a direct response. I mean, they're not saying it is, but it's a direct response to unionization. I think that if I had to guess internally, they are worried, and they are trying to, especially Howard Schultz is trying to do everything in his power to change things rapidly. Because if you think about it, I mean, he spoke about health and safety issues with employees like a month or two ago in those forums that he put together, and like little meetings with employees, and he is rapidly putting things into place.
Now, Joanna, do you think that we're going to see more of these kind of things from Schultz? I mean, this seems like it was a pretty rapid response, and it seems like he's trying to really respond to these things quickly. I mean, there's a new CEO coming in soon.
I think he's trying to do as much as he can before the new CEO is announced. The new CEO is supposed to be announced this fall. My guess would be maybe the next earnings call, maybe, or the one after that. And I definitely think he's trying to get as much done as possible. I think that the next thing that we will see will directly impact scheduling and understaffing issues. And I don't know what that might be, but that is pretty much the number one complaint that we're seeing employees complain about when they go through the unionization process. So it'll be interesting to see whether that's a tech-related solution or whatever.
And that's employees across the country. That's not just at Starbucks. I mean, but Starbucks has seen 170 stores have already unionized. There's 150 in the hopper ready to go. I mean, that's a lot of stores.
Yeah, for sure.
And now we just saw Chipotle get its second unionized, or it's going to have its second unionized store. So they're moving along. And so we're really seeing the movement pick up. So I wonder what the future is going to hold for these companies that are so people focused. I mean, Schultz is really trying to bring it back to the people, it seems like.
Yeah.
And this is a challenge when you say what you're going to do and you're looking after your people, and your people are the most important. And that means that your employees hold you to the promises that you've made. I thought it was interesting. This was years ago. This was, well, it was 21 years ago because it was 9/11. In New York City on 9/11, a lot of restaurants stayed open because they felt that it was their job to be supportive of the community. Starbucks, on the other hand, closed all their stores, saying they were looking after their employees. It was more of kind of a retail rather than a restaurant approach to managing that kind of situation. And I thought it was quite interesting at the time.
Very interesting. Well, moving on to a very different story that I have no way of tying to what we were just talking about. So I'm just going to hop right into it. talking about McDonald's buying back some units from a really big franchisee group. I mean, what does this kind of mean for McDonald's that it's buying back some units? And what do you guys think that it could hold for the future of the company?
I mean, my understanding is just that the operators of this franchise group in Florida were ready to retire. And so McDonald's said, okay, we'll buy back your stores. It's about 60 stores, which is a lot of units to buy at once. But for McDonald's, I mean, what is 60 stores, I guess? I'm not sure how much of McDonald's is corporate owned versus franchised. But to me, it seems a bit like just, a little blip.
Small potatoes.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but it seems like a pretty straightforward acquisition. I don't know if they tried to sell the units to another franchisee or if McDonald's just stepped right in. I don't know if they'll try to sell them in the future, but Ron Ruggles wrote that story and he's not sitting here with us today, but that was my impression from reading the story.
Well, I'd love to hear more from franchisees. So if you guys want to email Joanna or I, if you're listening to this, please do. We'd love to hear more about what it's like to be a franchisee. Joanna writes a really great column about it. So please email us and let us know. We're really interested in what it's like to be a franchisee. We'd love to get some of you guys on the podcast too. So definitely email us and keep us in the loop. So just figured that was a great time to plug that too, while we continue to talk about this story.
Yeah, and Joanna's got a great regular column now where she features franchisees a couple times a month on NRN. So
yeah, absolutely. I have had 3 columns thus far, and it's been some really interesting stories, and kind of talking a bit about not only how people came to be franchisees, but also the challenges that they face.
And McDonald's has always owned a whole bunch of restaurants. They're not one of those asset-light companies, so they know how to operate restaurants. Obviously, they quite often own the real estate anyway when they sell a franchise. So, yeah, I don't think this is a huge shift in McDonald's policy or anything like that. And if it is, well, then I was wrong, and it won't be the first time.
Luckily, we've got that recorded. So if you're wrong, we can play it back in a month, but
you can do it in a loop.
Yeah,
we'll just loop it.
I don't think you're wrong either, but that is why we record these.
We're on the record. It's okay.
We'll do it live. Sorry, that was an old meme. Showing my age.
I didn't even get that one. Yeah, you're very young, Joanna.
Ron Burgundy, and it was a meme in like a viral video in like the mid 2000s anyway.
Well, I'm curious about McDonald's as a company. I mean, they owned Chipotle at one time. They've owned all these companies, but they haven't had like an acquisition in a while. They've had like tech company acquisitions, but they haven't had restaurant acquisitions. Like, I'm curious about them as a brand, like what the future of McDonald's holds. Like, have they kind of become stagnant as just the biggest company and the biggest food company in the world? Like, has it just made them become who they are, and then are they settled as McDonald's, and are they not looking to do other things? I'm just curious what you guys think about that. I was just ideating on that while we were sitting here.
Well, they've made a bunch of tech upgrades in their restaurants, and you can go in now and you can order at a kiosk and not speak to a human, and so I think they are up to date with a lot of things that they need to be up to date with. If I were a McDonald's executive, I'd be super psyched that I was no longer work for a company that was the lightning rod of every single issue. I mean, it used to be people got angry. They would be angry at McDonald's. And now they do it at Starbucks instead. So it's kind of I would be psyched to be McDonald's. I think they're still doing reasonably well. And if a franchisee wants to retire, obviously they have the wherewithal to buy 60 restaurants. And I think they're still on top of what they're doing, but understand on some level that if it ain't broke, they don't have to fix it. And they move deliberatively with stuff. Like, they've been testing McPlant when other big chains have rolled out a lot of plant-based proteins. And McDonald's is asked frequently about whether they should have more meatless options. And their response has been, as soon as our consumers say they want it, we'll provide it for them. But, that it hasn't been a huge demand yet.
They did also revamp their McCafe line a few years ago, but for the most part, I think Bret's right. They know what works. They still see sales growth. They're the biggest, restaurant company in the US. They still see sales growth every year. And they overcame that big scandal a few years ago. And I think it's smart after something like that. If your sales keep growing, hey, keep your head down, keep doing what works. You said yourself, they've made some tech acquisitions, they've implemented those, and then, sold the companies right back out. I think McDonald's knows what they're doing, and I don't know. Again, we record these, so maybe I'll eat my words in a month, but I don't foresee any huge groundbreaking news in McDonald's immediate future. Now, watch this afternoon.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
They did introduce a salted pretzel McFlurry a little while ago. They're paying attention. Everybody likes sweet and salt these days. They got it.
Well, falling into some place that did make an acquisition, Dave & Buster's acquired Main Event, which also helped them kind of revamp their almost entire C-suite, 8 executives. So that's pretty much the C-suite, was completely shuffled around this week. I know there's not a lot to say about C-suite movements in general, but it's a big story to see one company just shift around an entire C-suite, I feel like. So I think it's something to still talk about.
Some of them, they just renamed the titles, So
4 of them,
yeah.
Nice transition, by the way. But I think what's really interesting about this is obviously, they're just basically merging their executive teams. A couple of people left, a couple of people renamed themselves, like you said, Bret. But I think that the interesting thing about this, now I actually wasn't familiar with the brand Main Event before this acquisition took place. And what I think that they're realizing with this, it seems like a really great acquisition that'll fit in, because I believe the Main Event is kind of focused on more families, and they have bowling and laser tag and stuff. It almost seems like a place where a lot of kids' birthday parties might be. Not that kids' birthday parties don't happen at Dave & Buster's, but I feel like Dave & Buster's is a little bit more skews more young adults. So I think they're kind of hoping to widen their demographic. And it seems like makes sense. It's a good fit. And so they kind of merged their C-suites.
Well,
go ahead, Bret. I was going to say, I grew up in an area that had Main Events and Dave & Buster's. And as kids, we had more parties at Main Event. And then in high school, we had more parties at Dave & Buster's. So I think your reading is accurate.
There we go. All right.
Well, and it seems like they also, they like the management that they bought when they got Main Event, because the former chief operating officer and chief marketing officer of Main Event are now they have those positions for the whole company. So they clearly were psyched about the executives that they were acquiring as well.
Yeah, and the CEO.
Is it wrong to say that an executive is acquired? I think that is what you're saying.
I don't know if you can acquire people, but
this is.
It's nice to see a nice change of pace to see an acquisition where the acquired brand, their C-suite isn't just immediately cleared out. Because you see that more frequently. So it's nice that now the C-suite is a blend of people from the two companies, and it's refreshing.
And it's probably really nice for the Main Event team, who's now, has this new owner, to see, wow, my people are up top too. I have representation. I know that they're going to be looking out for me too. And it's not just Dave & Buster's or bust. But so I find that really interesting. And Leigh Anne, exactly what you were saying is that a lot of acquisitions, they come in and they just kind of demolish the C-suite and they just say, we're your new owners. Here we go. So, I feel like this kind of seems like it's going to be a happy family. so far. But again, we record this, I could eat my words, but it does seem like it's going to be a happy family.
Well, mergers are always make the acquired company nervous. So, saying it's okay, some of your bosses are still your bosses, it's all right. You gotta make
it's probably comforting.
Got to appease some people, but it seems like they like them, which is, I think that's a really good sign. I think it's nice. It makes me feel like all warm and fuzzy inside.
Well, that's great.
All right. So this week's interview is Bret Schulman, as I said earlier, CEO of Cava. He and I spoke about some really great things. We talked about the new lemon chicken at Cava a lot, which as we had for an upcoming edition of Menu Tracker that you guys will see next week, was delicious. So it's really good. So we talk about their new menu items and we talked about all sorts of things. He's really interesting. And I had a great conversation with him, and it's part of our Snapshots of Success series. So definitely stay tuned for the next 3 weeks where you will get to hear all of our Snapshots of Success. 3 weeks after this is the first one.
I like what a great name Bret Schulman has, even though he spells Bret with 2 T's and I spell with 1. We're still friendly with each other. It's okay.
Well, thank you for saying that, Bret. I'm sure he appreciates it.
Seems like we get along well.
Well, everybody enjoy that interview, and we will see you back here next week.
Can't wait.
Ciao.